Ozymandias. Dash. P B Shelley. P B Shelley. Born in Horsham, England, August 4, 1792. Considered one of the major English Romantic poets. Attended Eton and Oxford, rumoured to have attended only one lecture throughout his time at Oxford. Married to Mary Shelley. Written in 1817 during a writing contest against Horace Smith. First published in January 11, 1818 in Leigh Hunt's Examiner. Thought to be inspired by the arrival of the statue of younger Memnon in Britain. A classic poem which has been studied and dissected countless times in the subject of English ever since its creation. Personal interpretation. Ozymandias. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings, look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." Lines 1 to 2. I met a traveler from an antique land who said. The poem begins immediately with an encounter between the speaker and a traveler that comes from an antique land. We're not sure about this traveler. He could be a native of this antique land, or just a tourist returning from his latest trip. Antique means something really old, like the couch at your grandmother's or the bunny ears on top of your television. The traveler could be coming from a place that is ancient, almost as if he were time traveling. Or he could just be coming from a place that has an older history, like Greece, Rome, or ancient Egypt. Lines 2 to 4. Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Lines 2 to 4. Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies. Here the traveler begins his speech. He tells the speaker about a pair of stone legs and that are somehow still standing in the middle of the desert. Those legs are huge, vast, and trunkless. Trunkless means without a torso, so it's a pair of legs with no body. Visage means face, a face implies a head, so we are being told that the head belonging to this sculpture is partially buried in the sand, near the legs. It is also, like the whole statue, shattered. Lines 4 to 6, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read. The traveler now gives a fuller description of the shattered visage lying in the sand. As it turns out, the visage, or face, isn't completely shattered because one can still see a frown, a wrinkled lip, and a sneer. After briefly describing the visage, 3, the lines shift our attention away from the statue to the guy who made the statue, the sculptor. The poem suggests that artists have the ability to perceive the true nature of other people in the present and not just in the past, with the benefit of hindsight. Tell is a cool word. The statue doesn't literally speak, but the frown and sneer are so perfectly rendered that they give the impression that they are speaking, telling us how great the sculptor was. Lines 7 to 8. Which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. The poem now tells us more about the passions of the face depicted on the statue. Weirdly, the passions still survive because they are stamped on these lifeless things. The lifeless things are the fragments of the statue in the desert. Stamp doesn't refer to an ink stamp, but rather to the artistic process by which the sculptor inscribed the frown and sneer on his statue's face. The word could also make you think of the ruler's power. Had he wanted to, he could have stamped out any of his subjects who offended him. Mocked has two meanings in this passage. It means both made fun of and copied, or imitated. Hand is a stand-in for the sculptor. So the sculptor both belittled and copied this man's passions. The heart that fed is a tricky phrase. It refers to the heart that fed or nourished the passions of the man that the statue represents. But if you think these lines are unclear, you're right. Even scholars have trouble figuring out what they mean. The passions not only survive, they have also outlived both the sculptor, the hand that mocked, and the heart of the man depicted by the statue. Note the contrast between life and death. The fragments of the statue are called lifeless things, The sculptor is dead, and so is the statue's subject. The passions, though, still survive. Lines 9 to 11, and on the pedestal these words appear: "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings, look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." The traveler tells us about an inscription at the foot of statue which finally reveals to us whom this statue represents. It is Ozymandias, the figure named in the title. Ozymandias was one of several Greek names for Ramses II of Egypt. The inscription suggests that Ozymandias is arrogant, or at least that he has grand ideas about his own power. He calls himself the King of Kings. Ozymandias also brags about his works. Maybe Hess referring to the famous temples he constructed at Abu Simbel or Thebes. He could also be calling attention to the numerous colossal statues of him, such as the one described in this poem. Ozymandias' speech is ambiguous here. On the one hand, he tells the mighty to despair because their achievements will never equal his works. On the other hand, he might be telling the mighty to despair as a kind of warning, saying something like, "Don't get your hopes up, guys, because your statues, works, political regimes, etc. will eventually be destroyed or fade away, with nothing to recall them but a dilapidated statue half buried in the sand." Lines 12 to 14. Nothing beside remains, round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. After the traveler recites the inscription, he resumes his description of the statue in the surrounding area. We are reminded again that nothing remains besides the head, legs, and pedestal, as if we didn't know the statue has been destroyed. The traveler tells us again that it is a colossal wreck. The very size of the statue, colossal, emphasizes the scope of Ozymandias' ambitions as well. It's almost as if because he thinks Hess the King of Kings, 10, he also has to build a really big statue. To complement the decay of the statue, the traveler describes a desolate and barren desert that seems to go on forever. The sands stretch far away. The statue is the only thing in this barren, flat desert. There was probably once a temple or something nearby, but it's long gone. The sands are lone, which means whatever else used to be beside the statue has been destroyed or buried. Several words in these lines start with the same letter, for example, besides, boundless, and bare, remains and round, lone and level, sands and stretch. Using multiple words with the same initial letter is called alliteration. Figure of speech. The sound in this poem follows an interesting and unique rhyme scheme of ababak-tzedefev. This can be broken down into a somewhat simpler interlocking rhyme scheme of ababas-edc-edfev. There is some use of half-rhymes in words such as stone and frown, as well as appear and despair. The poem's rhythm is an example of iambic pentameter. There are 3 lines that are end-stop lines, 8, 11, and 14, and the rest of the lines end in enjambment. This is seen in the following lines. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies. Each division of the poem is one continuous line of thought, adding to the sinuous, intertwining effect. The diction is chosen with great care and creates a strong imagery, as you may have noticed in the analysis. The notable diction of the poem is combined with alliteration to create even more powerful imagery, such as the sneer of cold command. Metaphorical uses help carry across the theme of the poem. The speaker describes a meeting with someone who has traveled to a place where ancient civilizations once existed. We know from the title that he's talking about Egypt. The traveler told the speaker a story about an old, fragmented statue in the middle of the desert. The statue was broken apart, but you can still make out the face of a person. The face looks stern and powerful, like a ruler. The sculptor did a good job at expressing the ruler's personality. The ruler was a wicked guy, but he took care of his people. On the pedestal near the face, the traveler reads an inscription in which the ruler Ozymandias tells anyone who might happen to pass by, basically, look around and see how awesome I am. But there is no other evidence of his awesomeness in the vicinity of his giant, broken statue. There is just a lot of sand, as far as the eye can see. The traveler ends his story. Commentary. This sonnet from 1817 is probably Shelley's most famous and most anthologized poem, which is somewhat strange, considering that it is in many ways an atypical poem for Shelley. and that it touches little upon the most important themes in his oeuvre at large: beauty, expression, love, imagination. Still, Ozymandias is a masterful sonnet. Essentially it is devoted to a single metaphor, the shattered, ruined statue in the desert wasteland, with its arrogant, passionate face and monomaniacal inscription, "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." The once great king's proud boast has been ironically disproved. Ozymandias's works have crumbled and disappeared, his civilization is gone, all has been turned to dust by the impersonal, indiscriminate, destructive power of history. The ruined statue is now merely a monument to one man's hubris, and a powerful statement about the insignificance of human beings to the passage of time. Ozymandias is first and foremost a metaphor for the ephemeral nature of political power, and in that sense the poem is Shelley's most outstanding political sonnet, trading the specific rage of a poem like England in 1819 for the crushing impersonal metaphor of the statue. But Ozymandias symbolizes not only political power, the statue can be a metaphor for the pride and hubris of all of humanity, in any of its manifestations. It is significant that all that remains of Ozymandias is a work of art and a group of words, as Shakespeare does in the sonnets. Shelley demonstrates that art and language long outlast the other legacies of power.